Well, hi everybody, and welcome to the Dairy Australia DairyBase information webinar. My name's Neil Lane, and I'm Program Manager here at Dairy Australia for Farm Business Management Capabilities. And with me today is
Helen Quinn, and my role is Program Manager for Farm Business Information.
We'll be your presenters today, and Neil Webster, who's will be joining us as well. So just a brief outline of our presentation today. We're going to go through just some of the things that have been going on in this DairyBase space and farm business management. Also talking about where does DairyBase fit within our broader farm business management program. We'll talk a little bit about where to go to get started with DairyBase, take you through the DairyBase webpage, how to log in, how to get registered, those types of things. And we'll talk about where we see DairyBase fitting in. Where's the value proposition for DairyBase, both from an individual farmer's perspective, groups of farmers, industry analysis perspective. And then we'll give a quick live demonstration and take you through a data set and how we get set up a year within the DairyBase system. So just talking about what's been happening. So prior to today, so this goes right back to over a number of years. Initially, the whole DairyBase initiative started off in a previous life as Dairy Point. It was an initiative by the Jeffrey Gardner Foundation and Jock McMillan and Wolfie Wagner and others over at the Gardner Foundation at that time floated this idea and broke a lot of ground, if you like. So several years down the track, we're now at the point where we have a live product under the Dairy Australia banner. We've had a extensive industry consultation process in the DairyBase build. This included, we did a sort of a pre-launch version at the Australian Dairy Conference down in Launceston back in February. And that was a really important exercise for us, and that it allowed us to get feedback from farmers and service providers before we actually went on with the final build. So that was a really useful exercise for us. So this is the first in a series of regular webinars we'll be having for farmers and service providers. And so there'll be regular webinars coming up, and these will be for both farmers themselves and service providers, but we'll also have sort of what we would call our expert user webinars. So those who want to get right into the detail, understand more the fine detail about how the calculations are worked out, what all the terminology means. There'll be what we call the expert sessions. There'll also be a series of regional workshops, and these will be coordinated through your local regional development program, your Gibbs Dairy, your Southwick Dairy, your Subtropical Dairy, and the like. And all this upcoming events will be housed on and detailed on our webpage, dairybase.com.au, and we'll be getting the sort of information out through the regular channels. So we went live on May the 25th, but the way we're talking about this is June as our launch month. So any information you require about DairyBase, all roads lead to dairybase.com.au. There we have our getting started fact sheet, our frequently asked questions, the information, both physical and financial, that you require to complete a DairyBase analysis. And we'll also be, as I said, hosting our upcoming events, future webinar times and dates, activities in the regions as well. Just like to point out that, as is always the case with our DA programs, our regional development programs are really important. They are our regional connection, and they're very important that they will control. They basically will coordinate the rollout of DairyBase activities in their regions, and it's our role here at DA to support that. So part of this sort of regional approach is that there's lots of resources in all the regions, whether they be through the RDPs or whether they'll be our partners like the NCDE or the state government agencies. It'll be the RDPs will be across all these various deliverers. So it's about driving awareness, and it's actually about coordinating the needs of the farmers, because every region will have different sort of priorities. So the other thing that here at DA that we're very conscious of is that we support the RDPs in helping to keep developing deliverer capacity capability. So both from a farmer and a service provider perspective, we are actually think we're coming off a very good base. We had our pre-launch forum here on the 21st of April. We had representation from all the Dairy Australia regions, and that was a good kick-off for sort of getting people, who are going to be delivering DairyBase up to speed with what's going on. I just want to talk a little bit about DairyBase and where it fits into our broader farm business management program. So under this broader program, first off, we've got this capability building, which is sort of extension of education. So one of the things we'll be rolling out over the next few months is a series of capability building programs, which will cover everything from novice to expert in farm business management capability. So our aim is to make sure that we can take people on a journey. They can come in at any point, but take them on a journey of helping them improve their skills in farm business management. Not much point us building tools like DairyBase unless we've got the skills and capabilities built around it. The important part of that is making sure, and as already touched on, is this service provider capability capacity. Our experience is that most people will use a third party. A lot of people use a third party as they enter the data or look for analysis of that data. So we think it's really important that we are well supported and we are at good capacity in the regions. So the other thing is that DairyBase is one tool. One of the common questions that get asked about DairyBase is it a cash flow tool? DairyBase isn't a cash flow tool. It's an annual summary of your management accounts, if you like, of your physical and financial details of your farm. So we are working on other tools here that will integrate and line up with DairyBase around feed budgeting and cash flow budgeting and the like. And then within this DairyBase, we have DairyBase and the farm data that goes in it. So it all fits together in our farm business management program. So just where will the data come from? So if we go back 8 years ago through our partnership, Dairy Australia has a strong partnership with DEPI, now DETCHA, where we've partnered with them to deliver the Dairy Farm Monitor project in Victoria for the last 8 years. So through that partnership, we have 75 sets of data from what we call really high quality data. So everything we want to know about the farm is this data gets audited or validated, and so it's the really high quality data. Over the last 2 years, 3 years, we have rolled the Dairy Farm Monitor project out nationwide, where we now have good coverage across every dairying region, and we think we'll have up to 300 sets of data coming in just by the Dairy Farm Monitor project running out nationwide. The important thing is that about this data is that it sits in DairyBase as our high quality data. So it's the high quality data that we use for the benchmarks. So anyone can get onto DairyBase, put in some numbers, have a look at it. They may be real or may not be real. Those numbers don't go into the benchmarks. And so for data sets to be considered for the benchmarks, they have to have gone through some type of auditing validation process. A lot of these high quality data sets might actually come from what we call the private data sets, and there's a number of consultants out there, accountants, milk process, individual farmers themselves who will be supplying high quality data. And a lot of the work that Wolfie Wagner did in the early days with Dairy Point created a lot of goodwill, and I think we've been able to continue building on that with regards to the private collectors of data. So there's a lot of discussion groups and consultancy groups out there who generate their own types of data sets, and we'll be aiming to work closely with all those people, and we've been getting really good feedback about putting this extra data into the DairyBase. Really important point is that for the first time, the dairy industry in Australia has a central repository for data, and so that's really important for us that we've now got somewhere to house all that data. The other place that data will come from is other DA initiatives. Back at the Australian Dairy Conference in February, we had, I think, 100 farmers log on and enter some data into DairyBase. Our discussion groups through Neil Webster's program, where we are sponsoring and contributing to the running of the discussion groups. Any financial data that gets generated through that process, we'll be able to house in DairyBase as well. We have a large supplier initiative up in Murray Dairy. We have the Accelerating Change program, which is about to be rolled out, and that will also generate a number of sets of DairyBase type data. So finally, we've got somewhere where all this information can sit in the one place. And that's really important from a few perspectives. We have this industry-wide database for farm business data. It's actually driving consistency over a number of areas. One about how we record information, but how we calculate the key farm business management measures and what we call them and how we describe them. So it's really, I think, an important message when we talk about farm business analysis, farm business performance, that we try and be as consistent in our terminology and our calculations as we can. And in doing that, we've built on a number of previous initiatives. So Dairy Farm Monitor is the obvious one, but we've had the likes of the taking stock where we can and where we've been able to. We've actually drawn heavily on the previous work that's gone before us. And the process has also sort of refined our thinking a little bit as well and highlighted to us where we need to be, maybe put a bit more effort into being consistent in how we report and describe farm business performance. The numerical evidence, when we talk about numerical evidence, farm business management is a lot about the people. No two farms are the same, no two people are the same. So we don't want to ignore that, but I guess the role that DairyBase plays in this is that DairyBase is the numerical evidence. It's the reference point, but we're not ignoring the uniqueness that comes with the individual and or their farm. So in terms of our capability program, which I think sort of comes under the headings of education and extension, our aim is to have a national and coordinated approach, a consistent farm business management capability across all channels, whether that be through the NCD or through some RDP activities or a combination of. But we're going to be aiming to have this consistency and building capability at all levels. And this capability building and through the extension and education process is aimed not just at farmers but at the service providers as well. So we're just going to pause here for a moment. It was remiss of me at the start. If you've got any questions, you'll notice there's a text box at the bottom left-hand corner. And so I'll notice some questions have come through already. So if you've got questions, please keep feeding them into that text box. We're going to pause here for some questions. We'll pause again in another 10, 15 minutes, and you'll be able to we'll answer questions then again at the end. So I'll just hand over to Neil, and he's going to. Oh, so Neil hasn't got the question, so I'm going to read out a couple. So can we get copies of the slides or download them for dissemination? The other thing I was remiss at not mentioning at the start of the webinar was this is being recorded. So this webinar will be hosted on the DairyBase webpage. So it'll be there. You can download it and watch it at any time. Should you be able to see the presenter? Unfortunately for you lot, you can't see Helen and I. You can just see our slides. And a question here around about what do you mean by capability building? So we think about when we talk about capability building, it's what we talk about being able to improve pasture management or cow management. We need the capability buildings around improving farm business management. So when we talk about this continuum from the novice to the expert, some of the really basic stuff that if you're coming into running a dairy business for the first time and you haven't got much experience, we need to make sure that people are aware of what's good practice, right down to making sure you have a desk. The front seat of the ute is not an office, and so embedding the really good, strong business and administration ideals, I guess, for running the business, all the way through to our expert levels, which will cover things like how do you be investor ready. So you've got a large, successful business. One of the things you might like to think about is how you're going to transition out of it, how you take it to the next level. If you've got that type of business, what type of governance structure should you have in place? So all the way through, we will have from novice to expert. We'll be looking to help improve farm business management capabilities across the spectrum. So there's a question here I might throw to Helen for. So the question is, what will the levels of access be, and how will this be determined?
Yeah, okay. So there will be two levels of access. So general access for majority of farmers and service providers, and then there will be an expert level of access for service providers with a number of consultants, and for those who want more detail around what's behind the calculation.
Okay, I think that's all the questions for now, so I might pass over to Helen and we'll go to the next section.
Okay, so what is DairyBase? So DairyBase is a project that we've established to provide farmers and industry with a national database of farm performance data. And as Neil's mentioned before, it's about the physical and the financial data. And that data includes the Dairy Farm Monitor data that's available nationally now. And more importantly, it's a web-based tool which farmers and advisors are able to go in, they're able to input their data, analyse their data and get instant reports, and so to look at their business performance over time. As a project, we're also aiming to standardise terminology, so to be consistent in the way that we talk about profit, cash and wealth, and to ensure consistency in calculations. So as Neil's mentioned before, the Dairy Farm Monitor project, that's been the basis by which we've built our data model and the way we report the data. And so the DairyBase tool is a subset of Dairy Farm Monitor, and so that's why you're able to go in and compare yourself to that background of the high quality Dairy Farm Monitor data. And it's important to note it is an annual farm performance analysis tool. It's not a monthly cash flow tool. So it's about looking at your business over a 12-month period. So benefits, firstly to farmers, to allow individual farmers, farmers that may not have been part of a farm analysis project before or part of Farm Monitor, to allow them to go in and to use the tool and look at the performance of their business over time, and to go in and to prepare either scenarios or annual budgets, so to look at the 12 months ahead of them as well as how their farms performed in the current year. And in doing that, you're able to go in and to filter data, so to look at that background of the Dairy Farm Monitor data, and to filter the data based on region, farm size, systems. So we'll go through that in a bit more detail when we look at DairyBase Live, but to be able to look at relevant benchmarks for your farm. So the value proposition for industry, farm business analysis, it is about the people, the farm and the operating conditions. And so DairyBase is a tool that is about the numbers. So it's important to keep that in mind, that DairyBase the tool is part of the broader picture. And as an industry, what it's going to do is going to provide facts to inform industry not only at a farm and a regional level, but also to provide Dairy Australia and the broader industry with the information that will allow us to do analysis and to contribute to discussions and debate. So DairyBase as a tool, it is part of the broader farm business management program, and it is about the numbers, which is a really important part, but not the only part. So privacy and data security, this is something that we spent a lot of time on. So as part of the build to ensure that we've got a system that allows for privacy and security of your farm data. So to log into DairyBase, you need to go to the dairybase.com.au website, and you register there, and you'll be provided with a unique Dairy Australia ID. And so that ID, where your personal data is kept, is within the Dairy Australia CRM database, which is completely separate to the DairyBase web tool. So no private farm or service provider data will be made available through the DairyBase website. So when I talk about private data, it's your name, your address, so anything that relates back to you as an individual, that's housed in a completely separate database, and the actual DairyBase system doesn't contain any of that personal information. As Neil mentioned before, the industry averages in DairyBase, they are derived from the Dairy Farm Monitor project, and we've set up the system in that way because the Dairy Farm Monitor project provides us with high quality checked data, so we've got confidence that the data is robust. And so the averages that that you pull out of the DairyBase system, they will be based on a minimum of 6 farm data sets. So there'll be no individual farm data that will be available in DairyBase, and you can have confidence that that data that's providing those industry averages are robust and are comprehensive. It's a comprehensive data set. So to access DairyBase, you go to dairybase.com.au. And you'll see that there's a big blue box which says log in to DairyBase. So you would click on the button here. So currently we've got a number of supporting materials on the DairyBase website. And so if you look at the tab when you get to the website, the Getting Started tab, you'll see that there's a number of resources already there. And over the coming months, we'll continue to add to the resources that sit on the dairybase.com.au website. So that's the key spot for support about DairyBase and also about the farm business management area more broadly. So if you went onto the DairyBase website today, what you'd find is that there's an input checklist guide. So for farmers and advisors, before you sit down and go through your DairyBase input sheet, there's a guide as to what you would need. There's FAQs. There's a section on getting started, which is about registering for DairyBase. And then there's a number of instructional videos and case studies. And more importantly, coming soon, we'll have discussion group information and a number of other resources. So the key spot to continue to go back to is to dairybase.com.au.
Okay, we might pause there for a moment for a second round of questions. So I've got a few that have been logged in. So Helen, there's a question there which says, will DairyBase Australia be linked with the DairyBase New Zealand?
So there's not a physical link. So we've built on the learnings from DairyBase in New Zealand, and in time we will have some benchmarks from New Zealand, but the two systems are certainly not linked because obviously from a Dairy Australia perspective we have privacy guidelines, and that requires us to keep our data here in Australia, and similarly in New Zealand. So there'll be some benchmarks in there, but the physical systems are not linked.
Okay, Helen, the next question I've got here is, will one service provider be able to access multiple farmer accounts to compare clients?
Yes, absolutely. So, so the farmer is the owner of the data sets, and so as the owner of that data set, they will have the ability to share their data set with others, so whether that be a service provider, and we're testing that in the coming weeks with a couple of farmers and consultants to make sure that works before we make it available to all farmers and to others.
And there's another question here. How many years of where was I looking? There was how many years of dairy farm monitor data will be on the DairyBase?
So all of the dairy farm monitor data will be in there. So that's the 8 years of data from 0607. And for those farmers that have been individual participants as part of the Dairy Farm Monitor project, they, when they log in, will be provided with access to their individual farmers' data sets. But we'll work through that over the next couple of months, just do it on a case-by-case basis.
So I'm not sure whether we're going to have a prize for the best question, but this one might go close. So I've got a question from Ron asking, is there a more detailed template around a standard chart of accounts? And so this question has come up a couple of times. Hopefully in the next sort of 24, 48 hours, we've been doing a lot of work in the background, getting up with what we think is a good standard chart of accounts. The chart of accounts will look very closely like the cash report in DairyBase, which we'll do a live demonstration of DairyBase in a moment and what those reports look like. But as an indication, the DairyBase cash report will look very similar to our standard chart of accounts concept. And the whole idea being that you think about the information, the things that you have to do in your business. You have to pay your bills and you have to pay your tax. So let's set up systems in our taxation accounts which look as closely as they can to, or correlate or match as closely as they can to our management accounts. So there's a little bit more physical data to collect, but we also want to make sure we're collecting and using our financial data in a way which easily transfers across the DairyBase.
And it's important that we recognise the work of the Murray Dairy team there. So the chart of accounts that we have in draft form is an updated version of the Murray Dairy chart of accounts, and that will become the Dairy Australia DairyBase chart of accounts and will be available on the website.
So when we think about the moving to management accounts can take us in any number of directions. So it can take us to a monthly cash flow or a DairyBase report, a bank proposal. So this whole step of saying, this is actually one of the core planks of one of our capability building programs, is that we've got this good standard way of collecting data that allows us to transfer from taxation accounts to management accounts. From management accounts, we can branch off to do a DairyBase, we can do a cash flow, a bank proposal. So it's just a good, logical way of handling the data. So there's a couple more questions. So I'll get Helen to answer this one. Will my login from the Australian Dairy Conference work?
No. So for those farmers that were part of the pilot testing as part of the Australian Dairy Conference, those login details will not work. So you'll need to go to the dairybase.com.au website and register as a new user.
And one final question before we move on, and if there's anything we haven't answered, we'll have a question and answer session at the end as well. The next question, are there any targets for increasing the number of high quality data sets either through Farm Monitor or private consultants?
So firstly, from a Farm Monitor perspective, we're looking to get to the 300 high quality data sets each year, and we've received advice from a biometrician in terms of having a statistically valid data set, and so that's the number that we need to get to. Then we will be really keen to continue to talk to consultants, and as we check that data, to make that data high quality as well. But look, so we've got targets around encouraging farmers and service providers to use the system, and then a lesser number for the actual high quality data sets that will be in there.
Neil, I got one before you go on, and it just goes back to Ron, just so we don't lose that question. And Ron was asking if there's going to be a more detailed template of the data that you need captured available. Does that link in with that chart of accounts question?
It does. I think it links in with the chart of accounts. So we do go to sort of a high level of detail and where all those sort of subcategories sit. And there's also about the physical data that we should be collecting.
And there is some information on the website, the dairybase.com.au website currently about the type of information you need, but it'll become evident as you go through the demonstrations, perhaps, I think.
I think it will, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It might be worth mentioning your cash flow tools.
Yeah, so we did mention earlier that there's other tools coming. There will be we're currently working on an industry standard cash flow tool. So with some functionality which will help us sort of link the feed requirements, feed budget, milk production to an actual cash flow budget. So that's well advanced in its development, and again, it's a watch this space. Sometime in the next couple of months, I would hope to have that sort of demonstrated and ready to go. There was a comment being made there that I now have to go and re-educate my accountants, and I look we've got one of our major pushes over the next few months will be to engage with the accountancy profession and sell this concept, if you like, of a standard chart of accounts. We go to the source of the problem. Let's try and collect as much dairy farm data in a way which is consistent as we can be.
So there's a question there, probably the final question, Neil, about statistically valid data at the regional level. What we're doing there is we're looking at a minimum of 6 data sets at the regional level. So that's been consistent with the federal government. So if you're aware of the Australian Dairy Industry Survey, they look at a minimum of 6 data sets for the regional level, which you could argue is not statistically valid, but keeping in mind that DairyBase is about comparing your business over time and using that comparative background data as a bench check.
Okay, so we might keep moving, conscious of time. We'll keep the presentation going. So I just want to talk a little bit for a moment about this concept of cash, profit and wealth. So if I was to think about how we describe farm profit, everyone's got a different definition. But for the purposes of DairyBase, we're trying to stick with the convention that's been in place for as much as possible. And there is a difference between the cash story and the profit story. So if we think about this left-hand side of the screen for now, so our cash position is our farm cash income, which is made up of milk sales, our livestock sales, less our purchases, bits and pieces of any other farm income. And then this is sort of the condensed version of our chart of accounts. So this is our main categories where we have our herd costs, our shed costs, our feed costs, and then we have and the feed costs will be split into homegrown feed costs and purchase feed costs. And then we talk about our cash overheads, which is things like our labour costs, our repairs and maintenance, our general administrative, telephone, those types of things. So when we take those cash costs are effectively known as our farm working expenses. When we take our farm working expenses away from our cash income, we get our farm operating surplus. And our farm operating surplus is used to pay for everything else. So if we think about it now from a profit perspective, there are some subtle differences. Milk sales would be essentially the same number. We talk about, in the profit calculation, we talk about the livestock trading. And the difference there is that not only are we accounting for sales and purchases, but we're also accounting for changes in livestock numbers during the course of the year. And so these aren't necessarily cash income or a cash loss, but it can be assigned a cash value. So the obvious one is that I've increased my cow numbers through natural replacements and rearing more heifers during the year. It may also include a revaluation of the livestock, so providing that long-term and sustainable revaluation of the livestock. Also there we talk about feed inventory changes. So through the course of the year, through the the operations of the farm. If I've changed the inventory levels that I'm holding from the start of the year to the end of the year, I should add that this is all based on Dairy Farm Monitor methodology. So the feed inventory changes would say, well, I have accumulated feed that I haven't used. It can be assigned a cash value effectively because it'll be feed that I can use in another year, or it's, some form, say in bales of hay, I could go and sell it into the market. So even though it's not cash right at this point in time, it can be assigned a cash value. And likewise, if I'm drawing down my feed reserves during the year, I should account for that in how I've operated for the year. So the other main difference when we talk about in the profit calculation, there's little difference in the herd cost, shed cost, and feed cost. The two main different costs that we add in the overhead costs is what we call come under this banner of non-cash overhead, which is primarily our imputed labour and depreciation. So imputed labour is what you as the owner-operator are worth. It may be less than drawings, it may be more than drawings, it may be exactly the same, but it's an industry standard for saying, what are you worth as the operator? What would you cost to replace? Or what could you earn in a similar role working for someone else? And depreciation is the loss in value that has occurred in the assets in the business through the operation in that year. So we're really talking about machinery, improvements, anything that's made of concrete or steel. And so from a farm business management perspective, we think about depreciation slightly differently to how an accountant might. We think about the genuine loss in value, that has occurred in the operation this year. So no matter how well things are maintained, eventually they'll have to be replaced, and that's reflected in the loss in value. An accountant will look at depreciation from how much of that depreciating asset can I write off in 1 year. So there are provisions in the tax laws which allow us to write off the value quicker than what they're actually losing value. So when we take away our total operating costs, which is this combination of variable costs and our cash and non-cash overheads, gives us this earnings before interest and tax, which is our standard EBIT calculation across not just farming but all business analysis. And so from that point forward, we talk about from our farm cash operating surplus. I'll talk about cash for a little bit now. From there we have within DairyBase, this will all be reported, our finance, which is our lease and interest costs, the drawings that have been taken out of the business, gives us this total farm cash income less total farm cash cost number. And from there we can even burrow down a little bit further to say, well, as a family, as a farming family or a farming entity, we had some non-farm income and expenditure coming in. It might be rental income from a house in town, or wages which are earned, which will just go into consolidated revenue. So we can understand what our total cash income less total cash cost position is. And similarly, when we go over to the profit, we talk about this net farm income number, which is our EBIT minus my interest and lease costs. So I'm not going to pause for question and answers there. What I'm going to do is jump into a demonstration of DairyBase. So bear with me for 2 seconds. And then we will come back to this. So I'll just go over to Helen for a moment, and she can take you through the DairyBase webpage.
Thanks, Neil. So the key on the DairyBase website is logging in, which I'll show you quickly. So you would click here, and then if you haven't already logged in, you would click on please register me as a new Dairy Australia user. And then enter first name, last name, email, your role, your address, and hit register. And when you do that, an email is sent to DairyBase support, and you'll be approved within 24 hours. So just on the role description, you've got the option to select dairy farmer, and then farm owner, farm share farmer, farm manager or employee, or service provider, or other. So, and as I mentioned before, this information here, this is your personal information, and so this information here is being stored within the Dairy Australia database, not within DairyBase.
Helen, do you just want to take us back through some of the other features we can find on the webpage?
Yeah, yep. So the key tab that we've populated to date is Getting Started, and under the Getting Started drop down, logging on for the first time. So we've included here a number of steps. So if you need to log on and to register as a new user, then the DairyBase user guide. So this guide here, it's a relatively short user guide, and in the coming weeks we'll have an expert user guide, but for now it gives you an overview of DairyBase and how to fill it out. There's an input checklist, so that covers off the physical and financial data that you would need before you input your DairyBase information, and some FAQs. So they're based on questions that we've had to date, and again that will be a work in progress. So, and just on the Getting Started, so if you go through the process of logging on, so go back to the home page, and you do register. So you hit the please register me as a new user. We will approve the registration within 24 hours. And if it's during business hours, it'll be a lot less than that turnaround.
Okay, so we might just jump into the DairyBase and give you a quick demonstration. So I'm just going to, so I can create a data set, so I'll just quickly go through how it might do that. So you would enter your new data set there, the description, you would then choose who your, what set of data that belongs to, what year it belongs to, and whether you decide to pre-populate that year you're copying with a previous year's data. So I'll just go to one I prepared earlier. Oops, not that one. Here. So now I'm just loading one of those sets of data, and I'll just take you through the physical input sheets, and then Helen will take you through the financial input sheets. So when we talk about the land, and the first up we say, I think we've populated DairyBase with 400 help buttons. So I click left click on there, every sort of heading has a pop-up sort of description. So, but we break up the land into land that's owned, land that is leased, whether it's milking area, support area, whether it's irrigated or non-irrigated. A brief description of the terrain and the average walking distance by the cows. You'll notice on each of these physical input sheets and in the financials as well, there's numbers up here which will give you a summary of the data that you've entered, and also it's a really good place to check whether you've got the decimal point in the right spot. And so if you've entered some erroneous data, you should be able to pick it up there straight away. In the livestock screen, we can choose different calving patterns. The minimum level of data required is on an annual basis. So if I click on the milking herd, for instance, we have the average number of livestock, the opening and closing numbers, the time spent on support area, the time spent on adjustment, and the balance being the time spent on the milking area, average age, value, and live weight. All important stuff for our balance sheet, but more importantly, or just as importantly, our parts consumption calculation. And so we can change what type of livestock we've got there. So the different categories of livestock. So again, if I, whoops, get out of there. Now, in terms of, so that's the minimum level of data. The optional level is to talk about the herd structure on a monthly basis. And we do the same in milk production, so lots of questions around calving patterns and cost of production and milk production patterns. So Dairy Farm Monitor collects this data on a monthly basis. We will be able to do the same here, but as an option, not an essential. So milk production, we can either enter the data as a kilograms or as a percentage, and the program will allow us to do either. Again, we're getting this feedback in real time, and again, we can do monthly production data if we choose as an option, with the minimum level of data being required being the annual data. In feed, we have the ability to enter 12 different feeds. So, you might look here, grass silage is a good example. So, again, it's a silage. It's being expressed as for tonnes of dry matter. What was our opening stock? What was our closing stock? How much we purchased? If we purchased it, what did we pay for it? Of that silage, what's been fed on the milking area? What was fed on the support area? Harvested on the milking area. Again, we have these little pop-up boxes everywhere. What was harvested on the milking area? What was harvested on the support area? And that gives us really the important information we need for the pasture consumption calculation. And the pasture consumption figure will be calculated on both the milking area and the total farm area if we provide the necessary data. And so to add another feed, I can click on that button. It'll take me to, and I can choose what type of feed I'm adding. In terms of fertiliser, it's the same thing. We have our choice of different fertilisers. So if I think about here, we can go to the different types of fertiliser. Again, it's not essential information, but optional. And if we want to start keeping a record of kilos of nutrients going on per hectare. We capture rainfall and irrigation information. Again, important when we get into showing how we filter the data. One of the parameters we'll be able to filter to in time will be the amount of rainfall and or irrigation available. So if we're doing a comparative analysis exercise and we might choose, say, 800 mil of rain, we're in an 800 mil rainfall zone, we might say, I want to filter the data regardless of where it's been generated in Australia. One of the ways I filter it might be on rainfall for, say, the 700 to 900 mil rainfall belt. And that way I can compare do my comparisons against farms with a similar water availability. Labour management, we just split it in between paid employees and unpaid employees, so our imputed payments. And so yeah, that's all the physical data, and I'll hand over to Helen now to do the financial data.
Okay, so yeah, financial data. So income, and obviously your milk income makes up a significant proportion of that. So you'd enter your milk income net there, livestock sales, feed sales, and non-farming income. It's important to note here that through both the physical and the financial, these categories do line up with the Dairy Farm Monitor process. So if you've been involved in Dairy Farm Monitor before, these tabs will be really familiar. The other thing here is you can select on the drop-down boxes. At the minute we're in a sample data set, so we can't edit it, but when you go in there and enter your own data, you'll be able to select on this drop-down to say whether you want to look at the figures in dollars per cow, dollars per kilogram milk dollars, total dollars, so you'll have the option to select on those drop-downs. Your variable costs, so split into the three categories. So your herd costs, so you'd enter your data on the left-hand side here, your shed costs and your feed costs. And again, we've got that immediate feedback. So as you enter the figures down the left-hand side, you'll see that this number up here will be updated immediately. So if you do enter data that's not accurate, you'll be able to see that straight away. Your overhead costs, and they've been split into your cash overhead costs and then your non-cash overhead costs. So we've set depreciation at 10%, and so you can change that if you'd like. And your imputed labour, that figure there will feed through from the number of FTEs that you entered in the physical tab. Your finance costs, so obviously your interest and your lease costs, and capital costs and livestock, other capital purchases, and your principal repayments. your assets, and then your liabilities. So the feedback that we had from the ADC conference process was it was reasonably intuitive and easy to fill out. And so since then we've included lots of help buttons and descriptions. And so we would be hoping that you'll be able to work through the tabs one at a time and to fill out the data.
Yep. Thanks, Helen. So now I'm just going to quickly run through the reports. We're having a number of questions come through, which is great. But I'm so quickly going to go through the reports now. So once you've entered all your data, click on Report. Now there's two types of reports we can do. We can do a single data set report. And so this is just a summary of my farm or my data set. And so you'll see across the top here we have the summary table, which, as the name suggests, is the summary of the 4 other reports. We have we can change the headings up the top here, and so you can see across the top here, you can have the various ways of representing the numbers. So the total number, the percentage number, the dollars per kilo milk solids. And so I might choose think this is getting a bit cluttered, so I can just take that one out. The physical table gives us a full physical breakdown of everything we're doing on the farm. I won't go into a lot of detail now, I'm just a bit conscious of time. I will spend a little bit of time on the cash table or the cash report. So we talked earlier about this concept of a standard chart of accounts. The standard chart of accounts document we're about to post the next sort of 24, 48 hours. You'll notice the cost categories look very similar to these, if not identical. And so, as an example, we would call, say, your herd cost is your category, your AI and herd test is your subcategory, and we consider that to be from a DA, what we call it standard chart of accounts concept. That's probably the minimum level of detail that you'd like to go to. If you choose to go to more detail, so you might break up your AI and herd test cost into its various components. We call that your subcategory, and you might even go to subcategories. That's your personal choice, and depending on how you're wanting to monitor and manage the business, all we'd say is that as long as it sits in the right place and sits under AI and herd test costs, and AI and herd test sits under herd costs, then we think that fits in with the concept of a standard chart of accounts. So the cash report, as the name suggests, talks about the cash side of the business, including drawings that we're taking out of the business, our finance costs and the like. The profit report is similar. The profit report, though, talks about our non-cash overheads, mainly being our imputed labour and our depreciation. A little explanation there. And so, and the other thing is about our livestock trading and feed inventory changes. So, and the other report here is our wealth table or our balance sheet. So, what do we have tied up in the business in terms of current assets, fixed assets, liabilities, all broken up into its categories, and our calculations on return on assets, which is the assets that we own with or without the bank, and the return on total assets being the assets that I own plus the assets that I lease. And then we can come down and look at it from an equity percentage calculation and our return on equity. So the other report that we have is a comparison report. And so in there I can choose different sets of data, and I can line that up against generate some filtering of the data. So in this situation here, I've chosen the 2012-13 dairy farm monitor results for the whole state of Victoria. To line myself up again, I'm going to display the data in the chart. The way I'll segment the data is based on the percentage of the farm's intake, which is feed graze versus total feed intake. We can look at all farms, whether they're irrigated or non-irrigated, and all farms regardless of their grazing system or their grain feeding system. And you'll notice up here that as I've applied that filter, for the averages there are 53 sets of data, and for the top 25% there are 13 sets of data. And I go to generate report. You'll now see we have the 3 years of data line. Sorry, my year of data lined up with my 2 benchmarks that I've created. The other thing I've done here is I've chosen to present this information on a dollars per kilo milk solids basis. If I was to go back to the report page, I could choose total number, dollars per cow, dollars per hectare, dollars per milking hectare. So the reports are similar to the individual farm, except we've just lined them up for this comparison purposes. So useful for tracking your own performance over time, useful for maybe doing a discussion group format. So again, the same format. What we have in the comparison reports, we also have these charts. Now, so that scatter graph, or that scatter of dots you can see, is all the data points which met our filter requirements. So there's 53 data points there, and the blue dot is our year of data. So we think this is another way of doing sort of comparative analysis where, previously we've just had sort of benchmarks to compare against, and what does the benchmark mean? As an old Gippslander, I think about a Gippsland benchmark being a combination of, fully irrigated farms in the McAllister, 600, 700 mil rainfall farms, out east of Yarram, 1200 mil rainfall farms in middle of the Straits Leckies. So what does our benchmark mean? So we were able to filter the data now according to particular rainfall bands or whatever, production systems, and we can see where I fit, where my individual data fits against the broader data set, how I filtered it. And so and these are all interactive charts. You can see that the various values change. We can change the X and Y axes on these, but we break it down into our our income, our variable costs, our overhead costs, total operating costs, EBIT calculations. And then we can also look at this from a wealth perspective, or the balance sheet. So what are we paying interest rates and lease rates? What are our total assets under management? What's the return on assets been for this data, for this particular set of data? So another way of presenting the data. So one other point I'll make is that we also have this download spreadsheet function. So if I click on that, it will take me to an Excel download. Hope that's going to work. Yes, it is. And so I can then access all this data in an Excel format. And then I can, if I want to produce my own reports or manipulate the data some other way or present it another way, then we can we can do that as well. Get out that one. So we might just go back to our So we do have a number of questions, which has been great. Thanks, guys. So we've got a couple of minutes, and we're going to have to go through reasonably quickly on those, and we'll answer the ones that we can.
And then we can respond separately.
Yeah. So we might.
I'll lead you through if you like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Righto. Look, we have got a number of questions, and I'm mindful of time, but we're just going to go through quickly and provide a quick answer to the questions as they're there. And of course, we knew that as soon as we started talking about DairyBase and the ins and outs of it, we're going to create a lot of questions, which is fantastic. I'll point to on the website there is an FAQ section as well, a frequently asked questions section. It is pretty nuts and bolts and covers how to get on. So all of these other questions are terrific. But we'll go back to Debbie's. Debbie was in there with a question about whether there's the ability in profit to account for other inventory changes, for example, fertiliser unspread.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. And if we want to take that one sort of step further, we might say, you could even argue that the years where you don't put enough fertiliser on because there's not enough cash in the business, and our standard sort of farming procedure is to sort of put more fertiliser on when there's more money about and less on. That if we're making a significant deviation, that we should account for that as well in my profit calculation. So that's sort of something you would do manually, but yes, we would encourage you to do that.
Okay, thanks, Neil. And Simon came in with a question about whether we can create 3 to 5 year average operating cost figures on a per kilo of milk solids basis for a particular farm subset, for example, rainfall, TMR, high pasture consumption?
So not at this stage. You'll be able to line up 3 to 5 years of data sets from your farm, but yeah, you can't create the average at this stage.
Depending on how handy you are in Excel, you might be able to generate a benchmark and then download that to Excel and then do your averages from there.
And just picking up on the last part of that question, Simon, if not now, is that something we'd look at? The improvement process, there's an improvement process in place around DairyBase, which involves basically capturing all the ideas and suggestions people have over the next 6 to 12 months, and then sitting down and prioritising which ones we'd look at to incorporate into DairyBase. So thanks for the idea. The next one was from Andrew about, is there going to be a set figure on depreciation and the value of imputed labour?
So the answer to that is so yes. So the figure on depreciation is 10%. Though you do have the opportunity as a farmer to change that if you want. But the benchmarks or the industry averages in there are based on farm monitor. So they are based on standard values, and similarly for the imputed labour. So you're asking the system to put in the number of FTEs, and then your imputed labour is calculated again based on the dairy farm monitor standard values.
Okay, and there's 2 questions, one from Michelle, one from Brian, and they're both around dairy farm monitor data. And so Michelle's just wondering, will we load up that dairy farm monitor data from previous years, or do they need to apply somehow?
And yeah, the answer to that is absolutely. So, so by the end of June, all of the individual dairy farm monitor data will be available for participant farms. But if you've logged on to DairyBase already and you'd like to see your individual historical data, just send an email to DairyBase support, and we can prioritise your farm data sets and get those done in the next couple of weeks. We're working through them one at a time.
Thanks, Helen. And from Marion, she's just asking, the system doesn't seem to allow to have a mixture of breeds in the herd, for example, 80% Holstein Friesian and 20% crossbred. Can this be done?
Not at the moment. The way I would probably allow for that, though, or to account for that is I think we've got to pick an average cow weight. So the breed's almost irrelevant. What's relevant for the purposes of DairyBase is the weight of the cow, because that's what's influencing the pasture consumption calculation. So you might have to do a bit of manual calculation saying, a weighted average weight of the live weight of the herd.
Yeah.
Is the best way I could think of doing that at the moment.
Yeah, and there's the option for a crossbreed, so you could do that to put in, select on the crossbreed and then just go from there.
Yeah. Okay. Next one was from Joanne. Does the program check that physical data makes sense? For example, do you have enough feed for the cows milked, and will it put up an alert if it seems to be out of whack? Is the technical term there?
No, it doesn't, and that's quite deliberate. So that's from feedback from our colleagues in New Zealand. So DairyBase in New Zealand is a program that does have those checks in place, and every time that a new farmer puts data in, it'll be outside the boundary of those checks. And so they suggested that you're better to provide immediate feedback on the screen rather than have an inbuilt system that you'll constantly be changing and will become frustrating for the user.
Thanks, Helen. And that just reminds me too, the DairyBase effort here has been a collaboration. We've been able to collaborate with Dairy New Zealand and learn a lot from them and the DairyBase that they've implemented over there. So Rex was just wondering, can you add information about alternative types of fertiliser, for example, chicken litter?
Yeah, so again, it would be selecting on other and then putting in the details.
Okay, terrific. So you can do that. Pamela just wants to know, is there a limited amount of data sets that you can have?
No, it's unlimited. So you would have seen when Neil selected on the financial years, you can go back as many years as you want and put in historical data if you've got that.
Okay, and Graham, finally, last question we've got that's come in. How do you allow for a lease being a feed cost?
So in DairyBase, lease is not a feed cost, it's a finance cost. And that's where DairyBase is based on the methodology of Dairy Farm Monitor Project. And so the two programs, the way they're calculating cash profit and wealth are exactly the same. And so any of those sorts of changes we would need to take up as part of a broader Dairy Australia discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been industry consultation all the way through. So just wanted to acknowledge that this is this has been really a collaborative effort, not just with Dairy NZ, but more importantly across all the stakeholders here in the Australian industry as well.
Look, just one more thing I'd mention too is that Dairy Australia does have funding available to support discussion groups, and that funding will be able to be used to support groups to get onto DairyBase, learn how to use DairyBase, and then look at how DairyBase can add value to their businesses. So anyone who's interested in that or involved in a group, certainly get in touch with your regional development program. If you Google them, Murray Dairy, Gibbs Dairy, they'll come up with their own websites with contact details. Otherwise, you can look on the Dairy Australia website for their contact details.
So thanks, guys. Thanks for everyone for logging in, and thank you very much for the questions. Just to sign up, just a couple of things. If you could ask you if you've got a couple of minutes just to fill out a short exit survey. Just a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, and in the next week or so will be posted on the DairyBase site. And this has been the first of what we hope will be a series of regular webinars and information updates moving forward. So look, thanks again, guys, for logging in. We've been thrilled with the turn up today and the questions, and happy dairy basing. Thanks, everybody.